Welcome back to Gray Maybe, everyone. If you're just tuning in, thank you so much for tuning in. And if you are a repeat listener, I can't thank you enough for coming back and listening to more episodes of Gray Maybe. Today, I have a very special person on the podcast. This is someone that I feel like I have a rich history with. He is one of the first people who gave me a lot of work opportunities in my professional career, especially work opportunities that had a lot of responsibility as an assistant. And I got to learn a lot from watching him and being around him and just having so much fun on the job and laughing so hard. This is my dear friend, choreographer, director, dancer, singer, actor, Raymond Del Barrio. He's also gone by Raymond Del Barrio or Ray Del Barrio. I'm going to stick to Ramon because that's how I met him today. Ramon Del Barrio, this guy. And before I even throw it to him, I have to say what the film that we worked on together that he was choreographing, which was a short that was mostly a musical. West Bank Story did win an Oscar. I mean, I can't say enough. Frankie Valli, Cheetah Rivera, Sisterella with Larry Hart, worked with Michael Jackson. He was a solid gold dancer. If you know what that is, that's extra special and amazing and very coveted. Whitney Houston. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And he's got stories for all of them, which you don't get those today. Well, maybe he'll give you a couple. Maybe he'll give you a few little breadcrumbs. But I've known Ramon to have a very rich, powerful, past, present, and future in arts. And I'm so excited to have him on here to talk about something a little different that he is also an expert in that I don't think a lot of people know about him. So without much more ado, Ramon Del Barrio, welcome to Gray Maybe.
Oh my God, Jillian, thank you so much. I want to meet that guy. Who is he?
He's so good. He's so good.
He
He's
sounds
really
like a lot of
funny.
fun.
He is fun. You
Uh,
laugh. You're gonna laugh a lot. You're gonna laugh a lot.
well, yes, we laughed through the tears. Thank you so much for
Yes.
that intro. So great to be here. And I'm so uh, proud of you in creating this Gray Maybe series. All of it I've been watching from the beginning, and it's vital. It's important conversations that we all need to have, including grief and end of life. But I'm just so proud of you, if I can say that. And I just,
Yeah.
good for you. It's very important work.
Thank you. I know you and I have had a
Yeah.
lot of conversations over time and space, at different points in our careers. Like I think a lot of conversations we have are about things that, we want to do that we're trying to make happen or things, that maybe haven't always gone our way or, past projects that have gone really well and things that are exciting. And then we talk a lot about future stuff. And all along these conversations we've had, you have in addition to being in the arts, you have caretaken for quite a few people in their end of life stage. And I also remember your father passing, which you told me before we logged on that today it's been 11 years today that he passed,
Yes.
which is kind of special to be talking about him today specifically. And you were there when he passed as well. And I shared the experience of the gasping breath. Just kidding. Made you think I was dead. You also had that
Yes.
experience.
Which, it's touching and it's real. I mean, I'm sure it's common, but to get to share it and share in the joy of that moment at, one of the most tragic moments or transitional moments that you and I both have experienced and other people as
Mm-hmm.
well. It's a gift in many ways, especially with my uncle's sense of humor and my family's sense of humor. But yeah, it's real. I think that one thing that I say is that I will never know the first breath of my child,
Mm-hmm.
but knowing and experiencing the final breath of my father changed my life forever.
Mm. Yeah.
There's nothing that can compare you for either.
Mm-hmm.
One is hopeful and futuristic, and there's a lifetime of possibility, and the other one is final.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so in about this time was the day in the hospital And shortly thereafter, his final breath
Mm-hmm.
was today. So thank you
So,
for, in asking me to speak on this in general, but that it happens to be today, I think is some kind of sign as well.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
because you and I just talked a couple days ago, and we keep in touch pretty regularly. And I had been meaning to ask you about coming on to the podcast because I know you do have kind of a rich history of dealing with people around the end of times, like being someone's caretaker and helping someone, and that person's family kind of be that transition, go through that transition, right? And be there for those people. And so I thought it was, only right that you would come on and discuss it. Because Terrence Yates, who you also know, and you guys have had
absolutely.
work relationships in the past.
Yeah.
She was her mom's caretaker, so she had that
Yes.
experience. And you've done this multiple times over with not just your immediate family member, but other people that were just close to you, or people that knew that you were good at this thing. And you had
Yes.
talked about it a little bit on the phone with me a day or so ago. Um, will you tell, will you tell what you'd like to share about caretaking and how you do, like you were telling me that you have a talent for this. And I mean that you, you kind of were telling me how you kind of walk in to a place and you know where things are and you know what needs to be done.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is, I mean, it's twofold, and you as a creator, producer, director, choreographer, a dancer, we have a transferable skill set of details and timing and caliber, quality, and I found that those skills were transferable. Now, I was doing Jersey Boys in Las Vegas, and I finished a 6-month contract when my father got ill. I left Vegas and I came back to Los Angeles to participate in what was happening, which was initially memory loss and what it was, and walking in, being somebody who pays attention to detail. I started to assess all the different variables. My stepmother, what her issues were, what she was dealing with, what was happening here, what is memory loss, what is the situation, and what is needed, and how best can I step in and alleviate and kind of uh, assist in things moving forward or smoother. And so my father was my first experience of that, and it felt very natural to be able to ask questions. I mean, you have to ask questions, you have to know, you have to understand, that very much like a performer, like, I'm here, I hit my mark, then I do this thing, then I transfer over there. I need to be aware of who's over there, what's happening. It's all very much transferable skills. Emotionally, that's another thing. Not everybody who's a dancer, producer, can just show up and emotionally ground themselves to navigate these things. But I found that I had that ability. I found that with my godfather, Joe Cassini, who also I ushered into long-term care and had to navigate all of these different details, that I could walk into the memory ward and just say, "Hey, everybody," and they would just
Mm-hmm.
all come to life. And I was like, "Look at you, and look at you, and look at you," and not that the caregivers were not that way as well, but they're working. They're serving, they're cleaning,
Mm-hmm.
they're navigating medicines, and so I could walk in and just get them to light up for the
Mm-hmm.
brief period of time. Same with my father, in that I knew that this was heavy, so I walked in, and that is part of my personality, is to smile and say, "How can I help?"
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then just move into fixing or connecting things that need to be connected. I didn't really know that I had the gift. This is, well, actually, um, when my dear friend Keith McDaniel was going to pass away, and he had called me from Los Angeles, and I was in New York. I left New York and I went back to LA, and whatever I was doing, I was like, Raymond, he's going to leave. in
And
a
this was a
month.
while ago. When was this?
This was 27 years ago. I was
Okay.
doing the workshops with Gwen Verdon and Chet Walker, the Fosse
Mm-hmm.
workshops, which
Mm-hmm.
ultimately became the Fosse Broadway show. But Keith was a dear friend, and when he told me that he was going to be dying,
Mm-hmm.
because he knew, I was like, I'm going. So I moved back to LA to be there for whatever it was that he needed. And it wasn't until then that I realized that I had this skill where, there was a bit of a, well, I need this, this person, his partner at the time needed this paperwork and needed stuff. And I just could open up a drawer and just, is this it? And they would go, that's exactly it. And so I realized intuitively as an empath and as an intuitive person that I could also be led to whatever was needed in terms of paperwork and all of that. With my father, I didn't have to do that as much. My father was more navigating the emotions of his wife, not my mother, but his wife, and also just being there for him. But then I also noticed other details, like nurses who didn't follow the same protocol, swabbing ports, doing things. Home care people I interviewed, they were supposed to be awake while he slept or I slept, and they were sleeping. And so I realized that once again, in show business, if you don't hit your mark and you don't, then you mess up the shot. You can't do that on live television in front of millions of people. You can't do that because you break, and you can't do it in a live musical because you could either get killed if you're in the wrong place with the set or whatever. You can't. We really have a low rate of messing up in
Yeah,
show
there's
business
not a
because
lot
of
of
there's not a
room
lot of
for
wiggle room.
error. Yeah, not
No.
a lot of room for error for what we do.
And in other industries, not so much. And I noticed in the medical field, the licensed nurse practitioners, the nurses, the registered nurses, the people like they're, and I just started clocking protocol, and then I started questioning them. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, I was labeled the Hellraiser in my dad's hospital because I would be like, why you're going to give my dad that breathing treatment, but you're dragging the tube on the floor? Like it just,
Mm-hmm.
there was just there. And look, it's a very difficult profession. I mean, after doing these things, out of the kindness and of my heart to people that I didn't know, but then also out of the love, for the people I did know, doing it as a profession, it's so difficult. They don't get paid enough.
Mm-hmm.
There is something that I didn't know about that I had to deal with after somebody that I was ultimately helping. I was doing palliative hospice care with a wonderful lady Broadway star, Marin Maisie, but I just knew her as Marin. But I didn't know that there was caregiver syndrome, and that people who actually study to be in this profession also have to take courses in
Mm-hmm.
psychology, and I didn't realize that there is trauma that happens with professionals.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't really talk about that, and family members are going through the trauma of losing someone. So there's not really a lot of conversation about
Right.
trauma and grief that a person goes through, having to assume all of this new responsibility and keep a stiff upper lip while navigating how they really feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
And
There's
so
no
I kind of,
place to displace those feelings, right?
well, and
Yeah.
it's like a social worker doesn't show up and say, look, now that you're here, and you're going to be doing this, you're going to be going through some of these things. And so you need someone to speak to as well. So you should
Mm-hmm.
probably, like, it's not really part of the protocol. Everybody's kind of on emergency energy, and do the best that you can. But I just found that my attention span worked really well in making sure the protocols were followed and things were done as much as you can. It only makes it a little bit easier to navigate what is truly sad and what's happening. With my father, he was fine. He had memory loss, but then he had a stroke, and then he was paralyzed half of his body, and he was a conductor, an orchestrator. So music and, and in the memory loss part of it, before the stroke, I would play him music that he had orchestrated and created with Michael Jackson, like Earth Poem and Earth Song. And like, he would hear this music and he just was emotionally moved, but he would say, I'm moved by it, and I know this is important, but I don't know what it is. And I'd be like, you created that. And so then there was those moments of like, oh, wow. And then I decided not to do that anymore, to alleviate some of his disappointment and knowing that something was wrong, and kind of just internalizing those moments.
Was that disappointing for you?
Of course.
Yeah.
Because my dad was very humble. My family they're humble. They're well-known musicians in the industry, but not interested in fame. And they were just very humble people. And so to see the depth of the emotion that he would feel listening to something that intuitively he knew he created, but he couldn't remember that he did. And he would say, the boy, oh, I did that with the boy. And I'd be like, Michael. And he'd be like, yeah, And so not being a father, not having younger siblings or nieces and nephews that I was parental with, all of a sudden, this was the first time that now I'm flipping into being a parent. It's not just a caregiver versus taker, because we don't take, we give. So it's the giving of care, and then all of a sudden this kind of compassionate humility for the patient or the person, and wanting to spare them any more possible grief, knowing that they're going through something. But so then I became more jovial, more, it's okay. Oh, don't worry about it. It's, it's great. Let's do, you go and do that. I'm going to go over here. Let's, here's a puzzle. Here's some memories that I scanned, and you can watch them on this DVD. And so I got into like memory care and just being creative as a producer. Like, how can I bring as much to, the situation? And I don't really remember, because you're in an emergency mode. Don't remember feeling my own grief until after he was gone. I mean, and that's kind of what happens, that you're on automatic. Or there could be family things where you get into fights with siblings or other people, and you express yourself, and some of it could be warranted, or other things can just be things you could easily set you off. So, but I didn't really have any of that, and you and I know, like, now at this point in my life, I realized that I'm an empath. So, I feel things and I know things before anyone has told me anything, if they never tell me anything. I just know what's in the room, and I know what's happening. Being aware of that and being able to work with that, it's taken a long time, where before I would just kind of turn into collateral damage, because you're there, so, I mean, with the grief of my father, like today, I think, wow, 11 years ago, he took his last breath, and I don't feel it in the way that I used to feel it. Death is a part of our humanity. And I think that our fear of it and our inability to navigate it has to do with the lack of education. But I also think that as human beings, we should know what we're made of. We should know at some point, biology should mean cadavers. You should understand what makes us who we are. And so then we might appreciate it more. We might take care of it more. We might understand it more, and understand what end of life is. Babies are feedings and comfort and diapering, pooping, toileting, basically. And that's the beginning of life. And end of life is feeding, toileting, bathing. It's really, it's they're both ends of the spectrum, and
Mm-hmm.
they're both just as important. One is hopeful in the beginning, and one is the
Mm-hmm.
end.
Mm-hmm.
And if I think we were taught that as human beings, we might at least be able to navigate things a little bit easier. But most of us learn on the spot, like you learned on the spot. You were
Mm-hmm.
like there, and you were like, okay, I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
What needs to happen, Dad? Or what needs to
Right.
happen, Mom? Or or doctor? And
Yeah.
you just do it. You take the
Mm-hmm.
direction, and you go. Which is what I did with my dad, and subsequently I did it with my godfather. And then because of that skill set, I was asked to help in New York with another senior, and to ultimately, I didn't know that I would be doing what I ended up doing for Marin, because when I was introduced to her, it was more clerical, that she was fine, and her husband, like, it was just to kind of be there because I had this skill set for details.
Right.
But when I
Right.
got called back about a year later, it was definitely, and I mean, what do? You don't say, well, I'll stay, but I need more money,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, you're either going to care for the person regardless.
Mm-hmm.
And in that case, I was doing, I mean, it was a lot, there
Yeah,
was
you were
oxygen
doing,
tanks and
yeah.
chemo pills and morphine things. And just like, you had to be ready. You had to be ready to pick the person up off the floor,
Mm-hmm.
to, navigate all these things. And the time that I spent with her, I was alone with her, and her husband was involved in a project that would take him, out of commission for certain amount of time. I mean, I could always get in touch with him, but I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the arrangement that they had with each other was what their arrangement was, and I was the person who would be there, for anything and everything, and I was really there for anything and everything. And
Mm-hmm.
you just don't know. You don't know until you're in it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
really, like with life, like, you have to jump in. You can watch all the videos you want on the internet, but until you're doing it, it's
Yeah.
you you know you know
Yeah. What has or has anything surprised you about grief or this end of life caretaking experience?
Well, I think for me personally, um what surprised me was how much I could go on automatic to do what was necessary in the moment, and not be involved in how I felt about it. I didn't really know that I could. I don't know if disassociation is. I didn't realize that I had this skill set that I could be like,
It's showtime.
okay, it's
No, it's
showtime. I
showtime.
mean,
It's showtime.
yeah, but it's showtime when you're changing someone's diaper, which is like, it's different. Or it's showtime, like,
It's
those are, we haven't done those
well,
gigs. Yeah.
well, but
No one's done that
it's
music video.
but I think obviously the feelings or the ideas behind it are different, but the it's time to kick into what needs to
Yeah.
happen, and it doesn't matter if your costume broke the minute before, or if you're
Yeah.
late on your entrance, or if something else went wrong. The minute it's showtime,
Yeah. No,
and
you're
you
right.
go
You're
into
live. You're on the
you're live.
Oscars. You're in front. You're featured. There's 90 million people watching.
But I
Go.
think, yeah, and it's like, it's either that kind of stress that we're used to, or it's this person, do it right in this moment, figure it out, and there isn't time to kind of second guess. And I think that goes
Yeah.
to kind of the skill set of the transferable skills that you're talking about. But yes, okay, so surprising you was in those moments how quickly you were able to just do what needed to be done without any emotionality, behind it. It
Yeah.
was like you knew exactly intuitively what needed done, how to do it, and you just did it without there being a lot
Yes.
of extra noise.
Or learned. I mean, in the case of Marin, the first thing that I had to learn and do was be comfortable with hydrating her. And so that was a port. And then there was a certain way. And then, although she showed me how to do it, to herself. So there was a level of comfort. And this is something that a loved one or a husband or a wife would do and can learn. But, for someone cold just coming in, I didn't have to start right away. But when I went back to the apartment, on YouTube, I was like, what do you do? How do you do? And then of course I'm a stickler for, so they're like, first establish a sterile area and do all
Mm-hmm.
of these things. And then, but ultimately, when it came down to it, she was like, look, I'll show you how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it became very like, once the choreography is shown to you,
Mm-hmm.
you do it. But inside, I was just like, oh my God, okay, there's bubbles. It's so you got to get the bubbles out. You got to, this, you got to clip that. If you don't clip that, then it got like, there were so
Right.
many things that could have gone wrong, but you find, not everybody, but I found that, okay, in this state, I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly with Marin, I mean, she was so capable and brave enough to just show me how to do it herself. I was like, look, if
Right.
the person who's ill can show you how to do it, you certainly could do it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there's also, it becomes a relationship. And so it was really the friendship that she and I forged through it all that strengthened me with everything I learned how to do. There was liquid methadone. There was, I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I was doing things that I would have never thought, I certainly wouldn't have volunteered for it
Right.
if I, but in learning it, I was like, no, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. And there's just something through the grief that I realized the resilience. There's a resilience on the other side of the grief, or simultaneously with the grief. There was
Mm-hmm.
like, and once again, I'm generalizing because not everybody can do, like most people are, they can't be in the room. They can't be around doctors, or they can't, some people are squeamish. Some people
Mm-hmm.
just, I found that I had this skill set and this gift that I would have never known had I had not shown up to
Mm-hmm.
help these people. Which is what I take from all the experiences, including my father.
Mm-hmm.
And my godfather, Joe Cassini, and there was Scully Freudenthal was this woman, this amazing lady whom I helped in New York first. And she was still on her own, but couldn't get down the stairs, needed doctors, we need to get her into a nursing home. Ultimately, the the paperwork, you need your end of life determination, you need your social security determination, you need any burial stuff that you might have, you need to have your current medical records. And it just became this checklist of like, okay, well, we need to get all of these things in order to get you aligned for the next level of care, the
Mm-hmm.
transition, whatever it is. Okay, the apartment, does it need to be cleaned? Does it need to be remediated? If you're moving,
Mm-hmm.
what are you going to take? What are you going to get rid of? They're like,
Mm-hmm.
it became the musical of transitional care. Or I used to make a joke. I still make a joke about it, but I could do an end of life musical called circling the drain, or circling around the bend, or almost there, or the end's in sight.
I think that would be really great, actually.
Well,
I
then I
think
was like, what are you doing? Dancing with the diapers, and pivot, and oxygen. And then, of course, there was that sitcom briefly where all of a sudden, they're doing a sitcom where the rich girl buys like an old folks home, was just recently on
Oh
TV with Linda
yeah.
Lavin and all of them. And I was like,
Yeah.
that's my idea.
You're like,
It's like, hey,
hey.
wait, but it just goes to show you that, you know, I mean, I think that there are original ideas, but then I just think that there are ideas that we all get that
Right,
are
right, or
common.
that, yeah, that
That
there's definitely might be a need for something in more art in that area, right? Because we
Well,
don't
it's an
have,
art form. End of life is
yeah,
an art form. I mean,
yeah.
it's really, and not surprisingly, the people who are doing it are the Latins. I'm Latin. All the people who are jovial and doing all of this kind of like memory care and stuff at the motion picture
Hmm.
home were Hispanic, and they
Mm,
did it well. And the Filipinos, and
hmm.
who do it well. And I mean, there are also people who by nature do it well.
Hmm.
And uh, I think that well. people who care do it well. It's not just Hispanics and Filipino. I mean, obviously, there's all walks of life, all ethnicities, one human race, but many ethnicities. But they're in the actual working fields. There are people who tend to be. My experience was, at least the motion picture home, was that it was, aside from the registered nurses who were administering medicines, the people who were running and cleaning and feeding and doing were the Hispanics and the Filipinos, and they were brilliant. They're brilliant.
Well, and I think you bring up a good point about culture and how different cultures might, either have more of a more of a predisposition to be accepting of certain life phases because that particular culture, religions, things like that, every culture kind of has a way of dealing with death. And I think some are better at it than others. I just think they are. I think, certain more tribal cultures have always been able to embrace and celebrate kind of that circle of life. And I think that there are other cultures that have just gotten really far away from it. I know myself, I was raised Roman Catholic, and death was not celebrated. It was not talked about. It was not like it wasn't talked about, but it kind of was, but through like Jesus, like, oh, Jesus died for your sins. And you're like, okay, well, that feels guilt-laced and like weird. I didn't ask him to do that, but thanks, and then it starts, and then you're kind of like, okay, so, but like, it was, so we're all going to die. I found my experience of my religious upbringing did not help me with life stages. It didn't help bring me any kind of peace. It didn't show me any kind of way to process grief or any kind of way to have a process or a toolkit. It was just like this heaven and hell situation, which is like another whole, like, oh, you better be good, or otherwise, you can do death wrong too. You could fuck it up, and now you're going to be like, it's just so much like,
well, I think that's also, you hit it right on the nail. Like here in Hawaii, I mean, the community of people are Hawaiians, Samoans, Vietnamese, Japanese, Chinese, Korean, Tahitian. Most of all of these cultures embrace their seniors. They take in family members. They take them all the way in. I won't say the Anglo community, but I mean, I don't think that it's culturally. The Italians probably do it as well. It just seems like in America, in America, next thing is that we put them away. We put in, the culture is to put them in a facility and let somebody else do the work.
Right. And although Hawaii is American, quote unquote, it was infiltrated. It was colonized.
It was colonized. And so, but as a people, as a culture, all the indigenous, which we're all indigenous at our core in some way. At least my mom is Italian, Hungarian, Romanian, Austrian, Jewish, Sephardic Jew. My father is Argentine. So, I mean, it seems like culturally how we treat each other's as elders varies, and it's part of it. I think that religion is some of the religious stuff, like, the washing of Jesus's feet, or the washing of or just the idea that the Pope would wash your feet. Like, there are ritualistic things that are reminiscent of the same kind of, everybody should, like, you should, when somebody passes, you bathe the body, you prep, there's this whole send off and it's just, it's a part of the culture of respect and honoring and also grieving. I think that it allows you to, it's as I think about it now, as we went, to view my father before his cremation, he seemed peaceful, and he was there. I've seen other open casket situations where they didn't look well, and they looked kind of waxy and weird and strange. And it definitely there are certain things that happen, um, it's not always the same, but, I mean, I know that I'm still, even though I've had what I would consider to be extensive experience in all of this, I feel very uneasy going up to an open casket of anybody
Right.
that I knew, because it's just, it's
Right.
there's a little disconnect. It's an understanding, and it's not so much like how will I feel or will I be able to deal with it. It's just, you know, um, I don't know. We've all seen enough movies, those
Hmm.
zombie movies where you just like,
Are they gonna breathe?
um,
Are they gonna breathe?
yeah, something's going to happen.
Yeah.
But once again, it's just a lack um, of education, and then there is no education on grieving. You have to
Yeah.
grieve in order to
Yeah.
experience. You don't know what it is until you grieve, you feel it, and then how you move through it and how you deal, if you act out, or is it's a life experience that
Hmm.
everybody has to have,
Hmm.
and it's individual. you know um I think, although I didn't know Marin as but for a year, and her husband, uh we forged a friendship, but my loss was more of the loss of the friendship and the time that I spent with her. It wasn't the same loss as all of her friends who knew her for
Right.
25, 30 years. I never got to
Right.
share a meal. I mean, we had meals together where we laughed and we had our moments, but it wasn't like she was in my life and I got to experience, her in her glory, as a friend. So my grief was different. It was a
Hmm.
caregiver's grief that was exacerbated by some, the shit show that happens after people pass away, because then that's a whole other thing. That there's personal grief, and then there's the cray cray that happens with family members or whatever, and the
Hmm.
memorials and the funeral. There's just like this whole other element of it that you cannot be prepared for. But my father, I mean, the last thing that you would think that you would want to do is tell your father it's okay. He could go. You can die.
Hmm.
Go ahead. It's okay to die. And there we were going. It's okay. Stop
Hmm.
breathing. Let go. And you're like,
Hmm.
and all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, this is different. I never thought that I would be like, let go,
Yeah.
thinking, you're only thinking for the person. You're only thinking, if they can hear you, to free
Right.
them. And
Right.
then, whatever happens after is your own experience. So, I mean, my grief, I don't feel the pain. It took a while with my father.
Hmm.
Uh, with Marin, that was very painful because I had
Hmm.
never done. I mean, even though I took care of my father, there was extenuating circumstances, and it was just a whole other dynamic. With Joe Cassini, who was amazing, salsa master, choreographer, worked with Marty Krofft, like just amazing, was Anne Margaret's first dance partner. But,
I met
Joe
Joe.
had
He
a,
lived upstairs or right next door or upstairs. Upstairs from me or
yes,
next door?
right next to
Right
me.
next door. Yeah, yeah. Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh
And,
yeah. When I would come over and visit, Joe could see you'd be like,
yeah.
Joe, I gotta go say hi to Joe, or Joe's got something for me. I gotta say hi to Joe.
Oh yeah, and he was just, how he was. Um, and he wasn't Latin, he was an Italian from Boston, but he was the salsa master. And one of my I was on the East Coast, and I and Joe had passed away at the motion picture home. And Joe had everybody dancing in the memory ward at the motion picture home.
Hmm.
So he had, like, this one salsa step that the nurses would all do and whatever.
Nice.
And his nurse, or the main nurse, Maria, she had a very thick accent. She talked like this. She
Hmm.
couldn't. So
Hmm.
when I spoke with her,
Hmm.
he was apparently an AFib, and so they were trying to get his heart to stop beating so fast, and she was holding him. And when she realized that he was probably going to die, in her thick accent, she was like, yo, do you believe in Jesus Christ? Do you believe in Jesus Christ? And he was a devout Catholic, and he was like, yes, it is. She said, okay, we're going to pray. We're going to pray. Our Father who art in heaven, ding, 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 ding. And so she
Right.
goes into and then so she's telling me this on the phone, and I'm like listening because I'm, devastated, but I want to hear these are his final,
Right.
And he said, I'm scared. And she said, don't you be scared. The Jesus Christ is going to be there. He's going to wash away all your sin. All your sin going to be gone. So
Yeah.
don't worry, yo. Don't worry, yo. Go into the light. Go into the light. And I was just like,
are you able to like,
oh,
were
I
you
mean,
like,
I was like, how perfect that the salsa master had a Hispanic lady telling, doing
yes,
the Lord's Prayer
yeah,
with him.
yes, yep, yep,
And
walking them to Jesus.
walking him to Jesus. And then I said, and she said, and then the last moments of her life, I said to him, it's okay, yo, you're gonna be okay, Jesus love you. And then Joe looked at her and he said, okay, I'm done. And then he died.
Stop it.
I swear to God. And that's when I just burst into tears. And she was like, Raymond, I had him. He went right to the light. He went to
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. And oh my goodness, it was a beautiful thing. And I was just like, oh,
God bless Maria.
I mean, God bless Maria. Like, this woman was, amazing.
Yeah.
And how perfect for Joe.
Yeah.
He could have had someone from Boston going, Joe, you believe in Jesus Christ, she could have been like this. Instead, it was the salsa master went into the light, with a flavor, and he broke on the two. It wasn't.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
He mamboed into heaven. So there are jovial moments in people's passing as well, and that's part of grief. That you go in and out of the sadness of them being gone, but the relief of them being relieved, and the things that are jovial about the memories, and
right.
I mean, the grief, you have to feel it though. You have to feel it. It wasn't until after my experience with Marin that I went and I had to speak to a therapist. Like, I had to be like, what's all of this? And he was like, oh, it's a professional thing, that people who do this for a living go through. And it's called this, and it's this, and this is how you process it, and this is how you navigate it, which, when family members die, there's nobody like after to say like, how are you feeling? Let's talk about, like, it's not part of the conversation that if you've endured trauma. And trauma could also be that you weren't there to help, but that they're just gone. And you're like, wait, they're gone? I can't, I'll never, there's all different kinds of trauma,
Yes. The misconception about trauma too is that something has to qualify as traumatizing when it is your experience of it. So different things are traumatizing to different people. So if you're highly sensitive, it may not take a lot, and that could be traumatizing to you. It's how you experience a situation is what makes it traumatic or not. So as you pointed out, there is a lot of trauma that can come with caring for someone, or just end of life, or, being shocked by someone's death. Yes, that's true too. Yes.
I mean,
yes, absolutely. And so, like, I'm so glad that you went and talked to someone, and in this process, with Marin and then other, griefs that you've experienced, what did you find helped you in that process? Obviously accepting, talking about it, finding help, feeling the feelings, is there anything you want to add to that as far as helpful?
Yeah, I think that, what it came down to, because in my dad's situation with this stepmom, and that whole dynamic was a shit show. There was a shit show after Marin. Like, there are things that happen that you cannot be prepared for. And what came back to me, and what I eventually finally could really process, was that the people that I helped were good with me. We were good. I did some things that my dad didn't want me to necessarily do. He was yelling at me, I'll wait for the nurse to change me. I'm like, well, she might not be here for a while. And so there were certain things that I did that he didn't like, but that I was good with my dad. Everything that I did with Marin, she was good. A matter of fact,
Mm-hmm.
she had the decency of coming to me in what seemed to be an all-night dream. Basically, there was movers, and this is the spiritual part now, because this, like, I'm also very connected on that end. So something magical and mystical that happened in this particular situation was that she was navigating and telling these men, this male energy, they were moving, they were packing, they were doing, and I couldn't hear anything, but she was in charge, and she was, and then who's the guy with the handlebar mustache? Sam. He was in with the Gaga, The Stars Born. Sam, not Waterston, but um, uh, he's an
I'm
actor
not.
with the handlebar mustache, gray, and
I'm
so
the
and he.
worst when it comes to like actors'
I know.
names.
He's
You're good.
you,
I'm
you
not
think
good at.
you think I would know his name after telling the story, but I always
All
get
right.
it wrong. But anyway, he walks up to me in the dream and says, "We're going to take it from here." And I was like, "All right." And it was like an all-night dream. And I woke up that morning and I just lit a candle, and there I was in New York. And
Is
and
that
it was
guy
only
living?
like,
The handlebars
yes,
must.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
he's
yeah,
living. Okay.
yeah. And in the dream, um, and he and I woke up and there I was, and I was like, wow. And I just like, and I hadn't seen her because from the time that I left, because my godmother was, now I needed to be taking care of her 100% because she could no longer go home. She needed to be in a nursing home. There was cognitive issues that needed to be addressed. Like I took care of Marin for the time that I said I would, and then a few weeks after, but I had to go because now my godmother was in a bad situation in Manhattan as well. So I had to leave. But from the time that I left, Marin was going into the hospital that morning. I want to say 10 days later, she came home and passed away. So I was in the thick of it, didn't really know where I was in the thick of it, because I wasn't asking questions like, what are we working with here? You just show up, and I was the Mary Poppins, of the energy. But I texted her, I think on September 3rd, I love you. I'm still in your corner. I still have the text that she, because we texted all the time. That's how we communicated from the bedroom and the living room. And she passed away, I want to say on September 13th. So I hadn't seen her for 10 days, basically. I spent about 400 something hours in 2 months with her. And then I hadn't seen her for 10 days, and then she was gone. But it was in that moment that I realized that, I mean, she had the decency as a spirit, as a human being, to come to me and say goodbye before she was leaving. And she left that morning. So I woke up around 6 a.m. and she passed away at 10 a.m. And, and when I mentioned this shit show, you're taking care of a person, but then all of a sudden when this person is on the cover of the newspapers, and then you realize who she was to everybody else and all of that, but that wasn't the nature of your relationship, your intimate relationship. The solace that I received from that experience, which now is 5 years, this September coming up, that she's gone, and then my father, 11 years, is that I was there for them. And they were okay with what I did for them. And the only people, although other people benefited from me being there, my stepmother, Marin's husband, like they all benefited from being alleviated of the time, that they got to be away and process. I was good with these people and they were good with me. And that was my agreement. My agreement, yes, was to these other people, but really it was to the person I was taking care of. And so in these later years now, I 1,000%, I'm so good with the people that I helped over. And that brings me peace, that brings me peace, even if I don't necessarily have a close relationship with my stepmother after, that was always a difficult situation prior to my dad passing. And, other people, other participants, what I do find is that when you're a person who is empathic, who does show up, who does the caliber and quality of work that you do, and Cheetah had recommended me, and Tom Viola and people had recommended me to Marin because they knew me and they were also vetting who's this person. When people realize what they're getting, they're so appreciative and they're so but when it's over, it's over. And so there's, you could be there as the most loving, caring person. I mean, I love these people like they were my family, but after they're gone, you very easily are just treated like the help.
Right. So you
they
felt
receive the benefits of your, go ahead.
Yeah, I just I'm noticing how purposeful that can be in the moment. And then once it's done, now it's like this lack of purpose in that moment. It's like, what? Now what?
I mean, the purpose was the purpose, but in the end, when the people who are still alive are grieving,
right.
I mean, and you can't say, well, wait a minute, what about how I feel or how come it's, because the person died. So there's this catch-22 of ultimately there's a reason why people who do it professionally, you might not want the licensed nurse practitioner that you don't really know, who is this person who comes in medical to do the work. You want somebody like me or like you, or someone who's going to love you and make you laugh and take care of you and just be that, and you want the benefit of that. But after a person passes away, it just turns into such a different thing for all the surviving people. That even if you do have a relationship with the people, like in the case of my stepmother, or you don't, you have a newly formed relationship, like in the case of Marin, it can end the same way, and people are spinning and spiraling and grieving. And of course, because you loved my father for 30 years and you loved your wife for 20 years and all your friends, and I was just the person who came in and did this particular amount of work in this kind of situation. Of course, I believed that she was going to survive because I didn't know the details, and that's what I needed to believe in order to show up and continue to be in with my father. I needed him to see me happy and enthusiastic there to make whatever it is he needs, work out. You spare them the despair. Your job is to alleviate that in the moment, and then you go quietly away, or you do whatever it is that you do after. But that's the job. And then, that's why they say, weddings and funerals are shit shows, because the emotions are high and things are, unrealistic, so it's what I learned. And that's having a spiritual experience. Like, my father hasn't come to me and said goodbye like Marin did. Joe Cassini hasn't come to me and said, thanks what you did for me, kid, nor has Scully. It doesn't always happen that way, but I think it happens when spirit feels that you need that, or that it warrants it. And in the case of the latter, her coming to me was, I say, she was decent all the way to her transition. And not everyone's like that. But you learn. And I also learned that you don't necessarily want to do that for strangers. Like I showed up because I could show up, and yes, I was recommended, and yes, I was going to love you and take care of you. But you don't do work like that unless you're professional. You don't do work like that. And I was paid. I mean, not certainly no.
But you're not like a person who's taking a ton of clients and showing up, and that's your main. You happen to step into that role.
You
for
compartmentalize, and you've had the training, and you can be like, okay, I'm going to love you, but I was all in. I was doing healings, and with Dad, it was, And Joe, once I got Joe and Scully into these nursing homes with the unbelievable, couldn't have been done without Marty Krofft, couldn't have been done without Tom Viola for Scully. I was the worker bee um, who took on the semantics and the logistics. It's logistical, but the caring is just something that you do. I mean, sure, I could have just shown up and just done the job and not, but I mean, that's not who I am. And so I was going to love you and take care of you and be concerned about you as if you were my own, because that's the job. Or that's how I approach the responsibility. You're making them safe. You're making, you have to be ready for any kind of emergency. I mean, and I had like 3 pages of questions, with her, like, well, what about this? And what about that? And what about this? And how about this? And, and it could have gone really wrong, if it went another way, in terms of resuscitations and paperwork and things. And it's like, I didn't have all the tools that I needed to have that would have protected me. And I wasn't working for a business that was bonded and, a social worker would have had all of those boxes checked, So I got lucky in the sense that I didn't get myself into a situation that could have been, scary.
Right.
But,
Right.
I learned that I could do it, and I learned that I shouldn't do it. For anybody other than family,
Yeah.
I mean, look, if you called and said, look, and Stefan was like, and I was like, I'm there because I love you, like it's there are reasons for doing it. And then, but you have to take into account what the price you might pay.
Right.
But still, the person who's leaving, if you love them or if you care enough about, what's happening, all of that leaves. And you're in it. So, grief is something that passes. Do I miss him? Does it hurt? I mean, sure. He was my father. Do I wish that Scully and Joe had longer? Well, they had wonderful lives. They passed in their 80s. Marin was 57. That's really, really sad,
Wow. Yeah.
and I'm 59 and I was doing it for her at 56 or, 55. And so it hit a little closer to home, but it also made me realize that, wow, we need to understand as well. I mean, we're such a mess, humanity's such a mess, but we really need to understand the value. And I say to dancers all the time, you're worrying about, this or that or the next thing. I mean, none of our friends or nobody's thinking about how they're going to die, or do they have diaper money, or who, and for those people who had kids, maybe they grew their own end of life care. People who have husbands and wives, maybe, they have someone there who's going to take care of them in the end, the last breath, we're not thinking that way. I mean, at 59 and 60 and 64, I mean, Chambers and Higgins and all these people, we're in our early 60s, we're still living and moving forward and creating and doing. But unless you have planned on how you're going to die, and do you have enough money to be able to die at home, and, whatever it is, we're not thinking about it. And it usually hits us in the face as a surprise situation. You can only be so prepared for death. Death is death, or dying. But the logistics of dying, while we're trying to get more money on streaming, and all of that kind of stuff. I mean,
we need money on streaming so we can die with dignity.
Well, look, I hope that I'm far from my end of life, but at 59 years old, after 30 something years of being in SAG, my pension is shit.
Yeah.
I look at the amount of money that I'm going to get to draw on, and I'm like, really? Wow, that's shit. And everybody that we see who's picketing, they're the working people. The working people are the ones who have stopped working. And so for all of the rest of us artists who might or might not be as fortunate all the time to be a series regular or constantly making money and stuff like that, we're in a different tier. Like, I've never heard anybody speak about background actors, let alone dancers. So there's like even tiers within our community as artists that, I mean, you might be able to get a grant, but it's one $1,500 grant. I mean, it's like we're not really thinking about end of life.
Mm-hmm.
My experience of Joe Cassini with everything that he did, and Marty Krofft, the TV specials and the theater stuff, and the parameters to get into the motion picture home, unless you have a shit ton of money or you
Mm-hmm.
worked, you don't get in.
Mm-hmm.
Most everyone is not going to get into the motion picture home
Mm-hmm.
unless you get there on scholarship because you know someone who can write a letter or who could do, and then it becomes still the same kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
The only
Mm-hmm.
reason why Joe Cassini got into the motion picture home was because Marty Krofft was his best friend.
Mm-hmm.
And he advocated and wrote and did and whatever he did. But, so even us as artists or in our community, as we're on strike and doing all of these things, the reality is that, you have to become someone and wealthy and make a ridiculous amount of money before you're ever going to get into a place like that.
Right.
And we're not even talking about that. So
Mm-hmm.
as beautiful as all of that sounds, it's still, end of life care and consideration is for the favored.
Mm-hmm.
And for the rest of everybody else who are the worker bees and just trying to navigate it, we're not thinking about death
Mm-hmm.
and dying and disease and how it's going to end, and let alone, and that's just paying for it. And
Right.
that's just geography. It's not about it's not even about who's going to care. That's about, well, I have enough money to pay for someone to care for me.
Right. And
And
our end of life stuff is not, it's so much more along the lines of how our medical and our healthcare is, obviously, because it's kind of one and the same, but it's not
what
at
you
all like
have.
it's not at all like our post office or our
No.
fire department or our, like it's not like,
Or
oh,
the
no.
Congress or any
Yeah.
of these other things where they get health insurance for the rest of their
Yeah.
lives, or they get the quality, like, there are certain industries that you could be a part
Mm-hmm.
of where you're guaranteed certain things, but most everybody else is on their own.
Yeah.
And
We don't have
that
that
grief
kind of, yeah. Oh, yeah.
and that grief, the grief, I mean, there's one thing, when you have enough money to pay someone, or you can get what you need and you can get the assistance and you can stay at home, or you could do, money still makes it easier than having no
Mm-hmm.
money.
Mm-hmm.
If I didn't step in when I did with Joe Cassini, he was gonna die in a lockdown on Western and Sunset
Mm-hmm.
because he had memory issues. So a memory ward was like 4 rooms with 4 men to a room in a kind of caged situation, and so, I mean, the truth of the matter is like, dying is hard enough, suffering is hard enough, getting the medicine is hard enough, but the industry of end of life and whatever makes it either better if you're fortunate or worse.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
that grief,
Mm-hmm.
that sadness of like, oh my God, I can't let this person stay in this
Right.
situation, or like, that's also a part of the grief.
Yeah.
Marin's situation, she was fine.
Mm-hmm.
Joe was lucky. Scully was lucky.
Mm-hmm.
My father, was also as a musician and all the, I mean, he had what he needed. But I would say for like 80% of everybody else, they don't.
Yeah.
And so you're subjected to situations and conditions and, all kinds of stuff that make the grieving process of losing somebody so much worse.
Yeah.
And that's a conversation also that when we talk about grieving, it's not just the loss, it's not just the sadness, it's the pain that you endure while the transition is happening, which is, I mean, we could go on and on about medical and health and coverage.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the last time I had health coverage through SAG.
Yeah.
How difficult is it to make $26,000 in SAG? Well, you got to book a
it
commercial.
is hard. Yeah.
You got to and then it can't, and now the commercials are non-union.
Yeah. And the residuals, you used to be able to you could qualify through your residuals, but that's based on if you're actually making good residuals, which have stopped since streaming. Yeah. Nobody's getting good residuals anymore.
I've been in you dance in some of the greatest movies, and I get residuals for like $2.75.
Right.
And it's 5 territories, 5 different countries. And it's like, so while it's important that we're sticking together and striking and doing and being involved in all of that, we have to also remember this is, it's all the working people.
Yeah.
It's all the working people. I mean, those people who haven't been fortunate enough to work, welcome to losing your health insurance. And it's difficult. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, so imagine everybody who doesn't have any of it, who can't get any of it.
Anticipatory grief.
It's
That's what it's called.
It's anticipatory. It's almost like it's grief, but it's
called
anxiety.
ambiguous. It's ambiguous grief, anticipatory grief, and it's also called disenfranchised grief.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like you're you're afraid of things that haven't happened that might happen because you can't get in the game, or whatever it is. Now, mind you, as artists, a lot of people will say, well, you want to be an artist. You want to be in this industry where you have to audition, and most everybody doesn't. I mean, that's your industry. Well, that is the case in our industry. We work in an industry that is
full of grief.
Full of grief. Well, and just all stereotypes and things, and you've got to be the right kind of this in order to play that, and blah, 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 blah. People who have 9-to-5 jobs, who work within a structure, who do the same thing for 20, 30 years in a structure, they still have these problems, but they're not the same problems that we have. I mean, to this day, people tell me, well, why haven't you left show business? And just, well, I've tried to do a lot of other things, including helping people, live until they die, making a living at it, or making a living in order to enjoy life.
You talked a little bit about things that helped in kind of getting through some of these grief processes, obviously time being one of them, talking to someone, feeling the feelings. Was there anything like right off the bat that you're like, well, that was not helpful? Like that right there, not helpful?
Well, what's not helpful is ruminating, playing it back, trying to figure out what could you have done better?
Gosh.
What did I do? How did I do? Why did this? Why? Because I almost, like you could kill yourself with why. There is no why. You do the best that you can and you get on with it. I did also do some creative writing. So if there is something that you want to say to the person or to the people that did you wrong, or that you felt were like this or like that or the next thing, write it out. Write it out. Have the conversation. Say what you need to say. In other instances, for me, because I'm an artist very much in a singer-songwriter, so I'm writing some material, some songs where I'm getting to say what I want to say, which is always that's our creative outlet. It could be in spoken word, it could be a song, but for pedestrian people who don't utilize those things to express themselves, creative writing, or just write the letter. Have the conversation, say what you want to say, cry the tears, get the anger out. There have been times that I'll go up to the top level of a parking lot here and just look at the sky, and I'll just, walk around. There's nobody up there, and I'll talk out loud. I'll say what I want to say.
I find you to be very spiritual in this kind of like non-denominational way. Like you're in Hawaii right now with your family, but you also have always kind of been like this, where you will seek out nature, and you kind of like, a lot of times I'll be, you'll give me a call and you're like, I'm just here by the ocean. I'm in the forest. I'm in the thing, like I'm at the mall, but like, you're like,
Yeah, the mall.
Hey, the mall can be very spiritual.
It is for me. It's like church, I'm part,
So do you have like, is there like, I mean, obviously I feel like the more spiritual someone is, the less likely they are to be able to really define what that is. But do you have a belief system around death or spirituality that kind of you would have anything to say about, like, other than?
I think so. I mean, look, my mother's Jewish, my father's Roman Catholic. We grew up meditating. So there was Paramahansa Yogananda, Krishnamurti. So there was a lot of that influence. But then I also grew up knowing about Jane Roberts and Seth material and spirit manifestation. And so as a young boy, there was, I knew that I was empathic, clairvoyant in a way. I could have conversations, with adults at 10 years
Mm-hmm.
old that were, the adults were like, why are you disconnected? Like, why do so that was my path. Uh, I definitely, and I've been, I was the kid who went and got communion and then turned around and went for seconds because I thought twice that Jesus would be better. And then I was going to hell and don't chew the host. And I was like, who's the host? I didn't even, who hosted this, like, you know, so like a
If you're
lot of the
If you're a
organized,
Catholic right now, you are dying laughing at that whole thing you just said.
right.
Okay,
Oh my
continue.
God.
Yes.
But I was like, look, I only got a quarter of the wafer. I mean, like I needed full Jesus that night, I needed the whole kit and caboodle. Um, but I owe ceremonies are ceremonies, and it's very clear, as we could see with all of the ancient books, that they were written by human beings who are seriously flawed with judgment and misogyny and hatred and crazy. I mean, look, scientifically, and I'm going to say it. It's like she wasn't a virgin. Whatever. I mean, we know in burlap and sandals, it's not possible. Unless extraterrestrials were involved. That's not it's not possible.
Yeah.
Now that we know science and biology, whatever, if you want to believe that out of a situation, it was a conception that was spiritually elevated and whatever it was, that's great. But when you think about what religion is versus spirit,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the spirit behind all of the
Mm-hmm.
religions is the same. It's love. It's being conscious of the people around you, conscientious, caring, compassionate, humility, being humble, all the things that we're not involved in right now. We're like egomaniacs and narcissists and hatred and the flip side of
Mm-hmm.
it all. But the common denominator in all of it has always been spirit. And I grew up around, spirit manifestation, and so nature, and also my participation in Hawaii, my Hawaiian family, my tutu, it's the Hawaiian people. And once again, indigenous cultures, they believe in the plants, in the sky, in the four directions, in the ocean. It's not, they're called pagans, but there's respect for the ocean and its power, respect for the sky, respect for how you pick plants, respect for how they would consume animals, that they would give their life. There was ceremonial. Now, we just did away with all the ceremony and we're just like feed and slaughter, feed and slaughter, feed and take and rip and do and rape and pillage and rape and pillage. But spirit for me has always been like, I say a prayer and ask if I can enter the water here, because I know that water can take my life easily. We're living on the side of a volcanic chain at any given time. Life is so precious that it could be taken from us for any, you don't know when your contract is up. So I've always grown up knowing that something greater was involved here. It's also why I'm so connected to my dance. Like you and I have spoken of this, but like dancers who learned how to dance and did jazz and ballet, and then we did dance and we made shapes and then we worked as dancers. That was a part of my life. But the dance that I do is greater than all of that. I could never stop dancing because I might stop gigging because no one's looking, for me for the gig or whatever. But as a dancer, dance has always been spirit. Dance was what I did when I was being bullied. Dance is what I did when I didn't understand what was happening. And, and music, lyrics, Elton John's Captain Fantastic album, and like the music and spirit and dance has always been what has kept me alive and keeps me alive today. If I couldn't do what I do in a dance studio, and I'm not saying do pirouettes and pas de bourrées and stuff, if I couldn't put on music and move, and have spirit come through me, I think my life would be very different. It would be abysmal in comparison. But dance and spirit for me has always been what shows me that no matter how much I think I'm in control of everything, there's something greater.
Right.
When I dance and move and people be like, oh my gosh, the way you danced, I'm like, I don't know. What did I do? Because I'm not paying attention, because I'm really not manipulating it. The music happens, or the space happens. It's a sacred space. You breathe and you move. And so to me, that spirit has always been a grounding force. So for pedestrians, again, go walk, Richard Gere and Pretty Woman, where even a whore can find her prince.
It's a family movie,
What a great musical. What a great family musical. But his character, she teaches him to walk in the grass, ground yourself, put your feet in the ground, sit and connect with the earth. Trees, we look at trees, oh, they're just trees. It's like the underground connectivity, the energy, the spirit of and the mana of the planet is greater than most of our abilities to understand it, let alone pay any attention to. So if you can't do creative writing, go sit in the park. Listen to some music that will make you feel more, or go in the desert and see, there's things all around us that are so amazingly awesome that we have absolutely no idea how they exist, and that are here every single day to remind us that there's something greater happening here. And it's not another outfit to purchase. It's not another gig to book. It's not another house to buy, or it's not it has, when you die, you don't take anything with you. Not one thing, not a rock, not a crystal, it's all love. It's all love. It's all memories of love. Even the trauma. It's, trauma is an earth-based, biological experience. Spirit, when spirit leaves our body, it's just whatever it was that was making our heart beat, whatever it was that motivated us to move throughout the day, to care, and so that's why, even though as an artist I've struggled, as many artists do, when you are at the lowest point, as a human being in society, government, medical, food stamps, no place to live, not homeless, but really no home, and all of those things. And you can find humility and joy and appreciation and gratitude. I know that I've never missed a meal. I know that the people that I care about, I really care about. And I know that it took me a while to get rid of all the people that I was feverishly trying to do and be a part of, or whatever. Like, you learn that the people that you have in your life that really love you and that you love, I mean, yes, they can still hurt you and vice versa. But I mean, coming from a place of gratitude is really, it's not passe. It's not a kitsch thing to say. Gratitude and being gracious. Anytime I go out and eat, if I can't finish that meal, or even if I don't need to eat the whole thing, I will take half of that meal and I'll put it in a box, and I'll find somebody out there who needs to eat on the way home to my next meal for dinner. Like, if I had a meal, somebody else who didn't have a meal should be able to have a meal. And I see people all the time on the street. Change. If I have a bunch of change, I save all my change in the car. I'll give the whole bag of change here. It's what keeps us human, compassionate humans, caring humans. And it's what's kept me alive. And it's also, healed a lot of the grief. There's no amount of money that I could have gotten that would have changed. Granted, if it was like 5 times the amount of money, for caring for that person or whatever, then at least after you could pay for a therapist, or you could go and buy yourself comforting things. But ultimately, the exchange, the thing that is most commensurate with your love and caring is gratitude and love. Sometimes not in return necessarily from who you'd like it to be, but it's just the full circle is that. And that's what's kept me alive and healing and moving forward and believing that there's still a future and that we can heal this planet. I mean, what do you do with all these awful, awful people? Like, you can't kill them all, and how do we love them? I mean, you could, but then but how do you love, what's the answer to the situation we're in right now? on the planet. It's like, how do we love? How do we change it? Well, people would need to just be like, oh, I have enough. I have
Right.
plenty. You have, let me give you
Right.
some. Here, I give you, you give me. I mean, it really is return to the simplest notion that there is no lack. There's only abundance. And if you're experiencing lack, it, you know, look in your heart. If you can feel gratitude, at your lowest point, it makes a difference. That's why I've thumbed through, not TikTok, but these IG, you know, my favorite, like I'll watch, you know, Undercover Boss and just bawl and watch it back to back to back, because it's so beautiful to see people caring,
like that
and making
return
a
to
difference,
humanity,
even though,
a little return to humanity.
it's like, wow. Or the guy who goes around and says, I don't have my wallet, and you have some food, can you give me? And they're like selling arepas on the side of the road. And the lady's like, yes, absolutely. And she gives him whatever. And she clearly has very little. And he's like, oh, that is so beautiful. Here's $1,000.
Right.
And they're like, what? And it's just like, because money's only, it's man-made. The money is fabricated. It's not equal to the amount of gold at Fort Knox. It's not this whole exchange of money and wealth is a man-made concept. They'll just print more money. What deficit? Just print. Like if you're just printing it, the value of it all is so skewed. There's nothing, you cannot buy the kind of love and caring and compassion and gratitude. Can't buy it. It's not something you purchase. It's something that you cultivate and you express. And I mean, you know me a long time. You know what my real life is. It's not my Instagram profile. It's not my website. You know, it's not that the 4 paragraphs that sum up my accolades. You know what my real life is. And what's the one thing that you could say about me? I tend to stay pretty happy. I tend to stay in gratitude and find a way to give.
You are always,
you know, all
giggling.
the time, not just in a disaster.
Always giggling.
And laughter.
Always laughing.
I mean, we have to, it's comedy and tragedy. There's a reason why it's like there is a symbiotic relationship. And if it wasn't for my understanding of joy brought through dance or whatever else it is that, you know, I do creatively or in just giving back, I think I would have a very different life and be a very different person.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, you know, you get that.
Absolutely.
You get that. Just you in creating these shows and creating this whole concept is, you know, from a place of wanting to heal, wanting to bring conversations to the forefront, wanting to give people outlets to speak and express, take back your power, and ending the shame that usually binds us. You know, we're not supposed to talk about that, or we're not supposed to, or you know, that's the quickest way to healing is gratitude.
And usually at the end of these episodes, I have my one last question, and that is usually, what is your suggestion for people who may be suffering right now? But I feel like you just gave like so many suggestions, and that overarching theme is that gratitude. Is to find the gratitude where you can find it.
Creative word. Find the gratitude. Write it down. What am I grateful for? I'm grateful that I got to spend the time. I'm grateful that I've had this opportunity. I'm grateful that I understand the situation better now. I'm grateful that I have my health in order to be able to figure this out. I'm grateful that although this might be this way, I have this. There's always something to be grateful for. I'm grateful for my ability to, you know, write this down. I'm grateful for my ability to understand that this might help me.
Right.
It's hard to be grateful when you're in pain, you know, especially when you feel that you've been wronged, or you feel that, you know, I mean, it's hard. I understand that. But the very idea that literally as oversimplistic as it sounds, it's not. The very idea that we get to wake up every morning. I'm grateful that I wake up.
I think your point is right, Ramon. I think that when we need, to be grateful, it's usually in the times that we are having the hardest time finding that gratitude. Like, I know that when I am not my best, I am the least likely to be grateful. And that's like the hardest time to find the gratefulness and things to be grateful for. But I think you've really laid out like a path of a lot of ideas of how to start to find that. It can be very small. It doesn't have to be overarching. It doesn't have to feel inauthentic. It can be real. And I just really love everything you've had to say today. I always love talking to you. You always make me laugh.
Oh,
you and I have laughed so much. You've given me so much on the job experience and life experience and laughs and fun times. And I just love you so much. And I'm so grateful that you are willing to come on the pod and talk about some of your expertise and your experiences.
Well, I mean, they're my experiences and time and repetition, expertise, you just learn on the job. And, maybe as you get older, I will definitely say that, it takes a minute. Some people will learn quicker. People learn when they learn. And it's certainly taken me a long time to understand what I've been doing and what I did and how I did it and how I could have done it differently and where I am now and how I can move forward. You giving me the opportunity to speak on some of these things. I never thought that I would speak on these things. I mean, we've had private conversations, but there's a difference, once you put it out, and then also being able to speak on it without any vitriol or any, like, there's no pain, it's just matter of fact, these are circumstances that happen, and I could, extrapolate from them these things and see where it could have been this, that, and the next thing, and maybe understand. And I just think as artists and empathic people that we tend to overwork because we're doing the work for ourselves and the other people, and we're whatever it is, if it's a trauma response or if it's just naturally that, my natural inclination is to show up and be like, what do you need? I have never walked into a situation where, usually this response is, well, you need to take care of yourself and you need to, and there's never been a time, even in my worst situation, that I wasn't receiving something. It's always reciprocal. Even if you don't understand what it is, the depth of it at the moment, there's never been a time that I could say, well, I didn't know. You went in, you did, and this is what was happening for you. You were alert, Raymond. You knew what you might have overlooked, or you might have discounted or decided that you were going to move forward when you were warned or whatever, but it's always reciprocal. And that's where we're at right now. I mean, accountability and responsibility, and those are the things that we're dealing with right now. We're looking at it straight in the face. We need accountability for actions and consequences. And so that's another healing factor of it. How did you participate? How did you participate? And how could what you feel right now have something to do with, what you agreed to, or things that happened after you agreed to one aspect and didn't really know the rest of it. So, it's a very comforting thing to know. I'm not a victim. I've never been a victim, even though there were things that I was victimized or, things that happened. But, it's like we all have an opportunity to show up and stand up for ourselves and other people. And I think that's what we're looking at right now. You see something, say something. Something's wrong. You speak out. I'm no longer, not that I've ever been at a loss for words, but I've held my tongue when I could have said a lot of things to a lot of people. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm going to say it now because it doesn't serve. There's people need to be accountable for their participation in things, ourselves, but then other people. So, You've always been very, you know, straight up, straightforward, you know, and that's one of my favorite
Well,
things
but you
about
know,
you,
Kitty, there's
that I
lots
love
of
about
things
you,
that I
is
want to
that
say to
you're,
people too, and I do not say them. I wait. I practice pause. It's called pause. It's called you pause. It's called you
yes,
pause, and you don't do it, even if you write the comment or the tweet, and then you just don't post it. So
hey,
there's the spiritual realm is telling us we're done.
yes,
we're,
enough. Yeah,
we're
shut it down,
we're
bitches.
our Wi-Fi keeps going off and on, and it's crazy because we were fine for so long, and now towards this end, it's just like and cut off, and cut off, and cut off, and cut off.
Yeah, enough. Spirit is going, shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. You've said enough. You've said
You've
enough.
told all the secrets. You're trying.
You're going down the
Yes,
rabbit hole.
yes,
Rabbit hole.
yes. Oh, Ramon,
I
thank you
love you,
so
Jilly. Thank you
much.
so much.
So many great things were said. I
Oh,
really appreciate it. Thank you, thank you.
I appreciate it too. I look forward to your other episodes and you know, other conversations. Thank you for asking me and giving me the opportunity.
Absolutely, thank you.